Welcome back to Paranormal Roundtable. I'm your host, Josh Turner, and with me is my guest and, of course, my co-host, Martin Nunley. And we got a lot to talk about, so let's jump right back into it and let's continue. Thank you.
A couple of things when you were saying that about demons manifesting in physical form. Yeah, that's creepy, and it happens. There was a time in Holmes County, one of my first incidents that I knew something is like, this is really messed up. I was in we had a mud room when you came out of the garage. It was a small room with a closet and a washer and dryer and a utility tub. And I always put the cat's litter box in the closet, and their food dish and water dish was in that room. So we had this cat, Moses. He was a big cat. And then we had gotten this kitten named Zoe. And Zoe was a calico cat, super cute. And I'm putting food in their dish. And now my wife at that time, she was already up in bed. And I'm getting ready to go to bed. So I put food in their dish. And as soon as I put the food in the dish, Zoe comes running into the room and runs over and starts eating. And I looked right at her. And I thought, how cute. I put the food away, walked out of the room. She's still in there eating. I walked through the house, walked into the foyer. I turned to go upstairs, and there's Zoe sitting on the top step, staring at me. And I was like, that's impossible. That is impossible. That had to be Moses I saw. I swore it was Zoe, but it had to be Moses. So I walk up the stairs, walk past Zoe across the landing, open the bedroom door, and there's Moses sleeping on the bed with my ex-wife. Now, how in the world, I saw a physical, solid form. One of those two cats wasn't really Zoe, either the one at the top of the stairs or the one that was in the room eating. But when I told her, my wife at the time, when I told her about it, I was like, I have to tell her, but she's going to think I'm crazy. And I told her what happened, and she said, oh, don't even tell me that. Don't even tell me that. She said, there's times when I'm at home alone and you're at work, and I'm downstairs on the elliptical, and I will see Moses run past out of the corner of my eye, and I think, there's Moses. And then I remember he's upstairs, and the door's shut, and we don't let him in the basement, and he's not there. So
like a phantom cat.
Yeah.
I was wondering, Patrick.
Go ahead.
I have a question for you, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
So I was wondering if you have any knowledge of or experiences with any of these almost curses that involved inhumanoid creatures like Bigfoot or Dogman or Goatman.
Not that I can think of off the top of my head, like directly like that myself. I can tell you there is a satanic meeting site, and it's them doing it. It's their property, and there's a valley. And if you watch my trailer for Nightmare in Holmes County, it's on YouTube. I take you right into that valley and show it to you. So, and again, there was a shed like what you were mentioning about where they used to do animal sacrifices and all that. And it's burnt down now. But I go right to where the shed's, that pile of rubble that's all charred, and I stand right on it and show, the viewer, this is what was going on here. But the creepy part, in that area, it's called Panther Hollow. It's a long winding road. It goes down through a valley, and all this Satanism is done in that valley. And a friend of mine that told me about the place and then took me there. He gave me a picture that is, it's in the second edition of Nightmare in Holmes County. It's in there. And he and his brother and a couple friends went out there. And I believe it was right around for sure summer solstice that year that they took the picture. And they were on the road that goes through the valley, and they could see a burning pentagram off in the field, and there were people standing around it like in dark robes. And so they took a picture of it. Well, they get out of there then, and they're driving, and my friend Christian, his brother, calls him, and he says, hey, pull over. I have to, because they were in two different cars. He says, I have to show you something. He pulls over, and his brother comes and shows him the picture. And he said this was the picture that should have shown the burning pentagram. There's no burning pentagram. At the very bottom of the picture, you can see like the weeds and that growing along the side of the road, but everything else is black. And on the left-hand side of the picture, you can see a weird little symbol that I like. It looks like it almost looks like a snake with a horse's head. And it looks like it doesn't belong in the picture. But I also know that symbol is from Mesopotamia and all kinds of demonic stuff that they did in Mesopotamia, which also goes into some of the weird stuff with the, I think it's called the 6th and 7th books of Moses or something like that. They're witchcraft books, and they claim that Moses wasn't a prophet of God. He was a magician. These books are highly demonic. I read through one of them, and I was like, it's flat out telling you how to conjure demons. So I suspect that's what they were doing, because there's this weird little symbol in the picture. But then you see there's a place where that looks like it's lighter, and it's a larger area and it's lighter. So they lighten the picture. You know, you can just hit the lighten button on like software and it'll bring more light into the picture. There is a face, and it looks spiritual, like it's morphed, but plain as day, you see the eyes, the nose, the forehead, the mouth. So where there should have been a burning pentagram, something blocked that out, and you could see its face on the left-hand side of the picture. That's not like a inhumanoid. That's just flat out a demonic spirit that got caught on the film, you know. But I mean, I totally believe in that stuff you're talking about. I mean, there's enough evidence that, and I mean, there's sane people that have witnessed these things, you know.
Well, I think cryptid is a bad term for him. That's why Barton, you know, he coined the term for me, inhumanoid. And of course, you know, our friend Albert Rosales, he calls them humanoids or inhumanoids. And that's really what they are. I mean, you know, like Dogman, like our other friend Ken Gerhardt, he made a post one day that just set off a firestorm of like, just, you know, he said Dogman is not a cryptid. It's not a cryptid, because cryptids are creatures that are like, they're like animals, you know, like the undiscovered species of animals, cryptozoology.
Yes.
Natural animals, right.
Yeah, natural animals. And he said Dogman's not. It's like a supernatural being. They exhibit supernatural qualities that scream Nephilim or demon. You know, and I'll tell you something. What you're talking about being in like when you record with people and stuff, weird stuff happens. Like literally, this is the second time it's happened. I've been sitting here, and in the front room, I keep seeing somebody's like head pop out from around the corner. And it's happened 2 or 3 times now. I guess 3. That's the third one.
Can you tell like what color it is?
It's black.
That's not good.
No, it's not good. It's like brownish black. Which is, you know, and one day I was sitting here, I was recording, and I thought I saw somebody walk to the restroom, which goes in front of the studio, and I'm like, what the heck? And Anthony, who's the only one that was in the studio, he was actually down the street getting some food, so it wasn't him. And I'm thinking, but I'm recording, you know, and I was like, well, I'm not going to stop the recording to go deal with what I know is not a person. So it's, you know, but I'll tell you something. I was in the studio one night, and I told you this, Patrick and Barton. I was dealing with a show, an episode 130. It's called The Brazilian Exorcist. And I had done some work on that. And when I first went into that, to do that, to research that and investigate that, I did it with trepidation. And my wife was like, well, you know, you need to be really careful. And she didn't really want me doing it. She didn't want me really researching it or doing it. So I had a friend of mine that speaks Portuguese because he's from Brazil. And I've known him for probably 15 years. So I got him to translate for me for this interview. And this woman who's now like, you know, I guess she's my age or whatever, but when she was a little kid, she witnessed an exorcism. And this woman that was having all this stuff happen, you know, she was contorting, you know, and then there was another guy that was doing it. He was the one, like, I think he was the one that got her involved in this, Santeria, Brujeria, whatever. And they were turning themselves into wolf-like shapes and contorting their bodies. It was crazy. Well, I'm sitting there listening to all this, and I said, "Hey, I'm recording," and I said, "Hey, I got to take a break," I'm trying to get their information, for the show, because it would have been hard to try to like make the show where like he's translating for her or whatever. So I just said, you know what, I'll take the story and I'll just retell it so it flows, And so I stopped and I took a break, and when I went to the restroom, I hear the suite next door to me. I hear talking, and it was like 11 o'clock at night, and it's got like a courtyard with like a fountain, whatever. So I walked out into the middle of and I looked, and were the lights, let's put it that way, nothing was illuminating from any of the doors. It was completely dark. So I walked out to the parking lot, nobody's out there. And so I walked by the suite next door, and I looked in, and I through the glass door, didn't see anybody, and I'm like, that's weird. Maybe there's some people working late, So I come back inside the studio, and I got back on the doing the work with them or whatever, and listening to this woman's story. Then I hear this bumping against the wall, and I thought, and it was very pronounced, and I have soundproofing on that wall. But I could hear it, and I could hear a language being spoken, and I speak several, and it was nothing like I've ever heard, and I can understand enough to communicate in several languages, and I've researched a lot of different languages, and I'm like, what is that? And it wasn't, I could tell you this, it wasn't Latin, Hebrew, it wasn't Aramaic, and it wasn't any of these kind of languages. It wasn't anything like that. It wasn't Arabic, and it wasn't Russian. It wasn't any of the Eastern Slovakian languages. It wasn't a Nordic language. It wasn't Germanic. It wasn't Celtic. I don't know what it was. I've never heard anything like it in my life. And it was like it was like two deep voices, but one, for some reason, I just knew one of them was like a male and one of them was a female, and it was like they were arguing. And the best way I can describe it, it sounded like that. And then that was like the female voice. And then what I took to be the male voice was like it was like that. And then it was like, it was like that. And I was like, what in the hell is that, dude? And so when I'm like, somebody had punched, like it knew I was there. And so I backed up, and then I hear this sliding going across, like you can hear somebody sliding on the other side of the wall.
Yeah.
And I was just like, it freaked me out so bad. I just came back in, and I said, hey, we're going to have to continue this another day. I'm done. I'm not going to, and so I left the studio. The next day, one of the girls is it was like a nail place, whatever, like not nails. They do, like threading, or what is it, eyelashes, all that kind of stuff, So I asked the girl, she's standing outside smoking a cigarette, and I was like, hey, I have a question for you. I was like, I have a show and I do next door, and I heard somebody in your office, like 11 o'clock last night, and she was the only one that was from here. Like the other women that worked there were immigrants. But she was like, no, she's like, we're gone by like 8 o'clock at the latest. And she's like, if there's anybody if you hear anything, it's not us. I don't know what it was. Well, a couple days later, I was coming back into the studio, and I'd already finished working on the project or whatever. And, I was getting ready to record with an interview. And so this girl tells me, she's like, dude, I am really freaked out after you told me what you told me the other day. She's like, I've been noticing weird stuff like happening in our office, in our studio. And I don't know if it has something to do with me, idea, but why it chose to go to that side, I have no idea. But it was really, really freaky, and it freaked me out. And since then, we've all had weird experiences in this studio, and we've had things happen. Now, and Barton can attest to this. On one of my live streams, there was like a wolf's face, sort of like it looked. A lot of people say it looked like a wolf's head, like materialized, kind of like behind me. I've had lights come off and on while I'm on the show. Barton has seen it, and then Barton has heard the wolf howl when I had Steve Stockton on. Strange noises, weird stuff, and then my wife was here one time, and she heard like this weird crackling, popping noise, and it was like it was coming from the midair. And then we've heard voices, me and my godson and my friend Scorpion, we all heard like a voice when we were walking out of the studio one day. I was like, what was that? And then, me and Anthony, my nephew, were in here one time, and we were standing there, and we heard like a snapping, popping noise, and it was like, what is that? We couldn't figure out where it was coming from, and it was just like, I mean, we don't have rats. I know that. I mean, and then my other nephew, he came into the studio one time, and he thought he saw something moving in the front room, and which I've seen, many times, and I don't know if maybe doing that case, touched something off. I don't believe that it's like from that case, but I think that it's kind of like when you open Pandora's box, it just kind of doesn't close, and so, but I'm not going to live my life in fear. I'm not afraid of it, because that's a food energy source for it, is just giving it life by making, you're afraid. And so, I'm just like, you know what? I rebuke you in Jesus' name. I'm not worried about this. I'm not going to sit here and let my, and then if you start imagining in your mind, which just makes things worse, because that's that just feeds it, you're giving it energy. And so I'm just like, I'm not going to give into it. And, oh, go ahead.
I have to throw this out there. Like, okay, this isn't like a Inhumanoid thing, but it's interesting. Okay, so do you remember me? I mentioned that when the one guy that went to that little weird church that came to my house and tried to help me, that he had experiences at my house. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a couple, and the reason why is I want to get your take on these. Okay, so the first time that guy came to my house, I was sleeping, and he knocked on the door, and then he just went and left a note on my car. So when I went out to feed my dogs, I was like, oh, there's a note. And I read the note, and I saw that it was from him. And this guy had talked to him on the phone, and he told me he would come and help me. So I was like, oh man, he was actually here. That's awesome. I feel like there's that's a good sign, When I went back in the house, I had these windows on the sides of my door, and I put all these pictures in the book so you can see what I'm talking about, but they're vertical windows on the sides of the door. And there's a steel frame around the windows, of course, and a steel door. And I had put magnetic curtain rods at the top and bottom of those windows, and there was like a long, narrow curtain on each side, because I got to the place where I really didn't want the Amish coming up and trying to look right into my house. So now those magnets are pretty strong. They're going to have no issue sticking to steel, right? When I came back in from getting that note that he left on my car, I was all, oh, great, I'll call him. I was happy, I walked into my foyer, and the one side to the right of the door, the curtain was like all screwed up at the top of the curtain. So there's no way a cat did that, because it would have had to do it from the bottom of the curtain. The whole curtain rod was moved. It was sitting at a weird angle. So excuse me. So I called him. And I said, I just had something kind of strange happen. And he said, well, let me tell you what I had happen first. He said, do you have a dog that howls like a wolf? And I said, no, I have a Rottweiler and a Beagle. Why, were they barking when you were here? He said, no, this was not a regular dog. He said, when I got out of my car, I stepped up onto your porch, and I could feel there's an evil presence there. And he said, I said something out loud like, you demons are going to leave this guy alone. And he said, I started hearing it sounded like a wolf howling. So there was no explanation for it. Well, so that's one story. Another one, I share all the details of this in the book, but I mean, when I was in that, imagine being in that environment for that many years and being hopeless and feeling like you're in a nightmare you can't wake up from, I got hopeless one night. I'm driving home, and I was like, I give up. I said, God, if you want to deliver me out of this situation, that's fine, but I give up. I don't even care anymore. I can't, I can't take this anymore. I don't care. I give up. I'm done. And I walked into my house and walked into the foyer. I came in through the garage. I walked into the foyer, and that I walked right past the front door, went upstairs, checked my answering machine in the bedroom, came out of my bedroom to get downstairs, and there was that curtain. Same exact thing. The top of the curtain was completely moved, and the curtain rod was pulled over. So the magnet wasn't even sticking to the steel frame of the window anymore. It was hanging over the wood strip that went between that steel frame of the window and the steel door. So I was like, there's no way that, I mean, something physically moved that and pulled the magnet over top of the wood instead of that's impossible. And I was repenting real quick because I was kind of giving up. Like, I can't take this anymore. I'm done. I give up. And I was repenting like crazy because I was scared. And I went outside. I took pictures of everything, and I went outside and I was walking around. Now it gets even weirder. I'm walking around and I can hear an owl in the tree. There's a little tiny little straggly tree line that goes between the Amish neighbor's field right above my property and my yard. There's like a fence line, and like the kind of trees that grow along a fence line. They're not big trees. I can hear an owl right by the house in the fence line in the trees. I go right out there with a flashlight. I can't find anything. Right where the noise is coming from, there's nothing. I took pictures. There were a lot of orbs in the pictures, but that night ended up being Friday. It was November 13th, Friday, November 13th, 2009. And there used to be a guy who called himself a so-called expert on the paranormal, and he was supposedly a ex-Illuminati member. His name was Doc Markey. And I talked to him on the phone because I thought, well, he's an expert. I'm going to run this past him. I talked to the guy about 15 minutes, and I was like, not only is he not an expert, he's a fraud. He's full of crap. He does not know what he's talking. Because I was like, I know the things I know, and he doesn't know what he's talking about. And he told me that owls aren't a symbol of anything bad, and that Friday the 13th is not a satanic holiday. All this nonsense. Well, as it turns out, absolutely, to American Indians, owls are a sign of a bad omen.
And to Mexicans, too.
Okay, so there you go. Mm-hmm. There you go.
That's the Lechuza,
yeah. I later...
That have a long history going back into the ancient times of being the ones who take the soul into the underworld.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So...
many culture.
Then, like years later, I run into... I met Russ Dizdar, who passed away about a year ago. Nice guy. Very much into spiritual warfare and deliverance ministry. Very nice guy. I feel bad he passed away, but I met him and his team. We sat down at a IHOP or a Denny's or something one night. We all just hung out and ate and talked. It was pretty cool. And later, I happened upon and I can't get into details where I met this lady, but one of the ladies from his team I ran into, and she was counseling, and she had this person she was counseling with her, and the person was having a very bad day because the person was a victim of generational satanic abuse, like ritualistic satanic abuse from her generations in her family. And because of all the abuse, she had multiple personalities and all that. And a lot of the time I was around him, the girl was, she was very scared. The reason the girl was so scared, and I recognized the lady as being part of Russ's group, and that's when we started talking. And the reason the girl that she was counseling was having such a horrible day was that day was a satanic holiday. And she was worried sick that her family was coming after her or sending something after her. So she was having a very bad day. And I asked that lady, we were talking, and I said, hey, do you know anything about Friday the 13th being a satanic holiday? And she said, why don't you ask her? She was raised in it. And I said, is Friday the 13th a satanic holiday? And she said, yes. And I thought, okay, so on a satanic holiday, and I'm living in a county full of Satanists and witches, and I'm already so down it isn't funny. So I was borderline giving up, and then something in my house moves by itself, and then I hear an owl that there's no owl there. That's no coincidence, I don't think.
No, I don't either. The first thing I could tell you, I know that that's the first thing I can tell you about Friday the 13th. The Templars were known to be they were just known for being they hoarded money. They committed usury. They were is attributed to. It's called the Hammurabi. I've read about it. It's like the ancient Sumerians, and I guess they believe that the number 12 was like the perfect number, which it comes up in the Bible a lot. They're 12, and then so it goes against that. It goes against the grain, because there's supposed to be 12 disciples, and the number 12 comes up over and over again. And I know that the Knights Templar, they had a lot of influence, a lot of symbolism from the Sumerian culture, and they used those symbols because at the time when they were doing what they did, which was like in the I guess the 14th century, they were at that point. That was when they were at the height of their power times. But during the medieval times, the Dark Ages, whatever, we were very much ignorant. And there wasn't really much technology, and it was there were decades. Medieval times was a time where lawless, and they also had a lot of connections to black magic, sex rituals. They had blackmail, dirt on all these different monarchs, and they became money changers. And it was just like they had a lot of power, and eventually the monarchies kind of all came together, and they went after them. And so Friday the 13th was the day that they were put to trial and killed. After they were put to, that's when they faced their justice. And it did seem kind of weird that when you read about it, it seems weird that they actually themselves followed like a lot of the teachings of the code of Hammurabi, and it's Hammurabi and code of Hammurabi it's one of the oldest, like a book. I don't know if you would call it a book, and I'm trying to remember everything I read about it, but it was basically like they followed that. And it was like 13th was celebrated by these cultures that came way before them. And so they would pay homage to it. And I think that whenever they were, eventually put to death, I think that was the whole point, was to punish them on that day, which was a day that they held in high esteem. And, of course, it was October 13th. I can't even... If you guys want to look it up or something, I'm not. I can't use my computer. On the 13th in the early 1300s, and I know that there was like there had been some like sort of like secret documentation that had been given to, I think it was King Philip, whichever number he was, of France, and then he basically had gone after them, and he confiscated their property. And it was disguised like he went after a few other, becoming one secret organization after another. And of course, Barton knows a lot about the Masons and and if anybody's listening and you're a Freemason, it's not too late. Okay. You can save yourself. I'm just kidding. The rumor is that you go past the point of no return. And what I mean by that is the 33rd level. All this is really, I guess, it's all symbolism. And so when you look at
demons are very big on symbolism.
Mm-hmm.
And and it's funny because in Christianity, there's things that are very symbolic and very powerful too, like communion, symbolic of, Christ's sacrifice for us, So, and a cross is a symbol of Christ's sacrifice for us, So it kind of goes both ways to a point, but demons are big. Everything satanic's got all kinds of symbols for sure.
It's all around our world too. When you
for Satanism, right?
Mm-hmm. You're right.
Yep, absolutely.
Creation.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. And when
Satanic counterfeit, if you will.
Yeah. Look at Baphomet. They were known to worship Baphomet. Now, if you follow Egyptians, and the deity changes, but it's still the same name. I mean, it's still the same, entity. Some people call it's still the same thing. It's the same goat-headed deity. The Templars, and of course, the goat head is the pentagram. So if they're doing a ritual on Friday the 13th with the pentagram, that is definitely symbolic because the pentagram was the symbol of the goat head, which is Baphomet's head, and the Templars very much used Baphomet's head, and of course they were killed on Friday the 13th. Some people say it might have just been a twist of irony or fate. We're against this bad stuff when they're really not. They're just throwing one of their own under the bus that got a little out of hand, and they couldn't cover for them anymore, so they just threw them under the bus. I mean, I'm not going to mention names or whatever, but think of a very powerful man who went to prison with the name W. And so these elites, and then you see them, the actors, which to me is there's this elite group of them, and then there's these singers, and they are, and I'm not talking about all of them, I'm talking about the big ones. They're flashing this with the circle with the three. So that means 666. It's pretty obvious what they're doing. They think they're being cute, like, oh, look, we're part of this, yeah. And they think it's cute because it's kind of like, oh, I'm on the winning team. They were like, they couldn't understand. And I was explaining to them, I said, even if these evil bastards were able to come back 1,000 times, and let's say each time they live for 100 years, I was like, that's still a drop in the bucket to eternity. It's nothing. It doesn't matter. You can come back and be in these wicked players, these WPs, and control these NPCs, these non-playable characters. They can keep coming back and doing whatever they do, but it doesn't matter because God only has to win once and it's over. Just like, I had this guy was telling me he was literally a daredevil. He was a stunt guy. And I didn't know him really well, but he lived in one of the properties I did security for. And he was talking about, I've cheated death multiple times. And I told him, I said, but death, that's why I quit doing it. And I was like, oh, good move. But the point is like, horrible atrocities and all these things. These humans, they do the same thing. What they're literally doing is going against the natural order of things. They think that they can stand in the river and make it flow the other way. They can't. It doesn't matter how powerful they are. They are still just subjects in this same matrix. And they can manipulate it, but in the end, there's only one power that's going to hold the keys.
Yeah.
And it's not them.
Let me ask you what you think of this. There's a pastor, I'm forgetting his name. Oh, goodness. I cannot think of his name for anything. He's really good, though. He says that for every horror movie that is made, there has to be a sacrifice. And like every one that glorifies the devil, there has to be a sacrifice made. Now, I don't know if that's actually happens because people actually do it, or if bad things happen to the people when they're making it. But you look at like these cursed films, like what they call like The Exorcist. Bad things happen to everybody working on that set. Poltergeist, a lot of these movies. He said if you look at every one of the horror movies, bad stuff always happens. Well, I haven't looked at all of them, but I mean, he's extremely interesting. I'll put it like that. I had already heard the story, and I haven't seen the movie, but I had already heard the story of the Foo Fighters recording an album in a haunted house. And weird, like there was legit, and weird stuff would happen. And it started off like they would leave their stuff all set up when they went home, and they'd come back and things would all be messed with. And then they started putting like baby monitors in, but they ended up making a movie about it. And the movie to me kind of looked like, man, why would you almost make it like a spoof comedy? Like it's you should have made it like based, more true to real life, I think. But right after that movie came out, their drummer overdoses and dies. I mean, that's definitely a strange coincidence.
Well, look at Loch Ness,
right.
Yeah, when you look at Led Zeppelin, I mean, they thought it was cute to live there. Don't go do it, folks. I'm just telling you, there's some interesting things going on.
Right.
And I was told too that, I don't know if this is true, but my brother was a musician and he was in a band and he was into black magic at the time. And he said that a lot of times you'll be singing the lyrics to whatever, and you don't realize that there's messages that are in there backwards. Like it may not all be planned. It just comes out that way. And then if you listen to certain music, they're supposed to be saying one thing, but it comes out sounding something different.
Yeah.
He said by the producers.
They definitely cast their spells through music.
Yes.
Because Satan is the god of music as well.
Yep. But I was thinking, I wonder sometimes if some of it's done supernaturally and it's still subliminal. You're still going to hear it in your subconscious. But the reason I say that was Queen. They had a live version. And I could definitely see them putting it in there on purpose. But I could also see some of it being like demonic and supernatural too.
Yeah, right. That would make sense. I agree
with you there, Patrick.
What's that?
And a lot of it's put in by the producers without the actual musician's knowledge.
Oh, I'm sure.
So I've heard several musicians come out and say, well, when people play this song back up to the studio to produce it and put it out. So a lot of things happen behind the artist's back.
Yeah.
Of course, a lot of the artists are Satanists themselves, especially in the heavy metal.
Yep.
Genre. But
and now it's rap too.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at a lot of them, like they just come right out.
Doesn't even need subliminal.
Yeah, Lil
Rap
Nas.
Subliminal message at all. It's just you can just listen to the lyrics and hear the satanic mantras coming right out.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's crazy.
You know what's weird when you do a dive into the Knights Templar, which a friend of mine, Pete's like really big into that, and we've had long, in-depth conversation. So if you do the numbers and you add 3 plus 9 equals 12, 2 equals 3. 3 is the number of the Trinity, and 12 I think was symbolic too in that way, because I think numerology has been around a long time. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I just think that because it says ology at the end, it makes people think, oh, you're dabbling in some sort of weird whatever. I just think that numbers have a lot of, there's like an enlightenment thing. Like it's like it lines up or whatever, 1111. I've had a lot of weird things like I've been, let me tell you my experience with 1111. This is me personally, what's happened to me. Like I've been pondering things and literally maybe have prayed on something, just it is in my experience. And then I've thought about it and thought, should I do this or not? And then I'll look at the clock and it'll be 11:11. I would see that number like all the time. I was like constantly seeing it. And so I asked a friend of mine who, this had nothing to do with numerology, but I asked him, what his opinion on it was. And he said that the meaning behind it was that everything lines up. And it's supposedly a number of love and hertz too that you can play. I forgot what it is, like 111 or something. But I know that that 111 and 1111 are supposedly like everything lines up. So if you see that whenever you're pondering or trying to do something, and so I did. but I didn't know what it was. It kept happening, and I would just look at the clock, and it would be 11:11, and I'd be like, wow. And it's right when I'm thinking about something very strong, typically spiritually. And when I see that, it makes me feel like, okay, maybe I should go forward. So I did that. I started following my instincts on it, and it kind of worked out. Now, it is said that when you see it, that it's basically putting you on notice that you're on the right path to whatever it is that you're doing. And it is supposedly the number of the angels or whatever. What's interesting to me, though, is that 1 and 0s are the codes, for the computer codes. Like everything is like zeros and ones. And I thought that was interesting. I don't know. But 4 is not considered to be a lucky number. And I'll tell you why, by a lot of cultures. Chinese, for example, a very ancient culture. Of course, I'm not talking about the modern China, because that's a whole nother. The strongest sphere of influence, and the second would obviously be Japan, but they had a strong influence in the Orient and the East, in the Eastern tradition, and they all tend to believe that 4 is an unlucky. So like you go into certain restaurants and stuff, it's not so much anymore because they've kind of joined the West and the modern age and just kind of ignoring all these ancient traditions. But restaurants would only have like 3 chairs because 3 was considered a very good number, 4 was not. And so when you take 13, 1 plus 3 equals 4. 4 is considered to be not a good number. And so I don't know, maybe that has also something to do with, our like Saturn, the gods. Thor was Thursday. That's Thor's day. And then Frigga was what Friday was named after. And Frigga, I believe, is a Germanic. It's when Christianity took root, they wanted the Scandinavians to denounce their paganism. And so they told them that, Frigga, she's not someone to be honored because she was a witch. And so supposedly, her and 11 other witches would consort with the devil. And I guess that added up to 13 because that's her and 11, that's 12. And then it equaled 13. And so it happened every Friday because it was her day. It was named after her. What's really, really weird to me was, as Christians, and even Muslims, I've talked to Muslims about this too. And it's weird that our calendars are like, are named after, like Monday's Moon Day, and Thursday's Thor's Day, and Friday is named after Frigga, and Saturn is Saturday. It's really weird because Saturn, it's like he was not the good guy. Saturno was not the good guy, So it's odd that Saturday is actually the Sabbath for some religions. And it just, to me, that's really weird. I don't see how you would use a day named after, sort of like, I guess, the bad guy deity. Why would you make that your Sabbath? That doesn't make any sense to me. And then
it wasn't called Saturday back then, brother. It was just the first day. So that's the day. So that's the Seventh Day Adventists, they worship like the ancient people did, using Saturday as the 7th day instead of the 6th or whatever.
Yeah.
But that was all changed later on. But in the beginning, everyone knew that Saturday was the Sabbath day, the 7th day. Like Sunday being the 1st, Saturday being the 7th. So that's where that came about. And I think they're right. I honestly think they're right. Even though it was later called Saturn Day or Saturday, that's a corruption of, it's just like the Satanists do with everything. They try to take what's good and make it something evil.
Yep.
Really bizarre to me. And when you look at a calendar, now I remember as a kid, and this gets weird. It gets into the Mandela effect and everything else. I don't remember calendars starting on the Sunday. When I was a kid, I distinctly remember calendars always, the first day of the week was always Monday. And now the calendars are all on Sunday. But I believe that was because at one time our calendars did start on a Monday. Because I remember being in school and the calendars always were that way. Any calendar you looked at. But because the people that control everything observe the Sabbath, that's why that is now not the first day of the week. Sunday is. So,
what is your take? What is your take on it?
And I was with my wife and my nephew, my godson. We were up here at the studio, and we walked out, and we see this big picture window on the apartment. They were like, "What?" And it's a big lit up window, and I'm like, "Yeah, when did that?" Which was just basically all brick, and now it's a big window. To me, I think that, and we're talking about Saturn and Saturna and whatever. I think CERN, which is basically the Celtic god of mischief, they've opened up the abyss. And I believe that they have jumped us timelines. And I think it's been going on for quite some time. And you as a person, like one individual, cannot rate it with it through the middle. No, it hasn't. I remember the VW symbol very distinctly being one complete, and now it's separated. That's just a small one, and of course, if you look at Ed McMahon, and I've done a whole show, we've done 2 shows like on the Mandela Effect, but if you look at Ed McMahon, they're like, he wasn't the prize patrol. I was like, yes, he was, because that was everybody's dream, was for him to come from Publishers Clearinghouse and knock on your door.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, he never worked for Publishers Clearinghouse. Okay. A bizarro world that we're living in.
A friend of mine has the game, and he has the monocle.
Oh, see, there is that. Now, there is residue. That's what we call residue. And I even saw like I left, I didn't even take the picture. And I was like, I was going to take a picture of it because to me, that's residue. And I can't even... $1 million you go back and it's not there, and then they're going to say, "Oh, your mind's playing tricks on you," blah blah blah. Because some of these sheeple, they're so determined to buy into this whole thing, and most of those people wouldn't even get through the first episode with you and me and Bart and Patrick. So it doesn't matter anyway. They're not even going to be this far in. So
they would think we're all crazy.
Yeah, they're already dropped out. They're done because they'll be like, "Oh my God, they're talking about demons and stuff. That's crazy,"
Yeah,
they're not going to be, there's some 2 guys that believe in Bigfoot and stuff talking to this other crazy guy about exorcisms. Let's get out of here. So they're going to be gone. It's not going to matter. But the thing is, you can't prove it because you're going like, I know 100%, but then they're like, well, memory is very fallible. But when you have thousands and thousands of people, I'm in this one Mandela group, it's like 800,000 people in it. And we're all crazy? There's like 1 million people. They're just crazy?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. My gut on that is that it has to do with CERN. I've always felt that. Because I remember hearing that he died, and then they have that commercial he's on now. It's like an infomercial. And that was going on, and then I heard he died, and I remember thinking, I wonder if they'll keep him on that infomercial or refilm it. And now they're acting like he's still alive. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I swore that
People say Patrick Swayze, he's died twice. The Queen, they're saying this is the 3rd time she's died. Now Mandela, that the effect is named after, he's died 3 times. It just goes on and on and on. I mean, there's just so many. I've found so many Mandela effects, and I'm a very observant person. You guys have ever heard of synesthesia? Yeah, I'm like a synesthete. And so what it is like I add numbers adhere to colors and certain smells and things like that. I own synesthete, and I have a mild version of it, but I also have a photographic memory. Now, that doesn't work. You're supposed to be able to remember every single thing that happens. That's not how it works. There's different versions of it. And mine, people ask me how I can remember people's stories, and people will tell me their story if I set it to record. You know what I mean? Like I make my brain hyper focused on what you're saying. It will take. I will absorb it, and it'll be probably 90-something% accurate.
Yeah.
And but you have to actually turn the record button on. Or hit the record button. That's basically look like I distinctly remember certain things. Like when I was a kid going to Port Aransas. And I remember the ocean, and I remember like scenes of the waves coming, and it's like it was perfectly embedded in my mind. It's indelibly burned into your mind. Everybody has a little bit of that, but mine is kind of extreme. I also have a very high IQ. And that's this. I hate when people, because somebody's going to go, oh, he's over there bragging about his IQ. You know, and then they're going to, the peanut gallery comes out. I've had hours of conversation with Barton. Barton knows this is the truth. And I do have information like a computer because I've committed it to my mind. And Barton, you've mentioned that before. I've had people tell me, oh, you should be a professor. One of the great compliments I got from Ron Murphy. And when you hear Ron talk, he is so smart. I mean, he's a genius, and he talks like this, and he sounds like a professor from The Simpsons. And you're like, dude, and I'm not mocking him. I mean, he's and I was like, well, I dropped out in college and became successful, so I can't do that. But, I told him, I said, I can't be a professor. But I do teach. I mean, and I had someone tell me, she's like, your students will come to you. And so when they come to the show, they learn. You learn a lot about things, and so that's part of the whole deal here, is trying to open up people's minds in a good way and influence them in a good way, because it seems I dropped out of that. I just like, you know what? Everybody's trying to be more badder than the next guy. I would like to be the good guy and try to stop all this. One man can't do it alone. And that's the whole point of this show that we're doing now, me and Barton working together, try to bring a little bit of enlightenment to people so that they can see, wake up, dude, look at what's going on. And I don't mean woke, I mean awake.
Yeah.
Two totally different things. Woke culture is BS, and awake is where you need to be. And I had a really devout Christian the other day. She was telling me, she goes, well, what does it matter? Jesus is going to come and save us all anyway. I was like, that's not really how you should look at it, because our duty is still to try to get as many people on board the ship before it sets sail. So just sitting back and waiting for Jesus to take care of you and take care of all these problems. And then she's like, well, I'm not going to face the judgment or the tribulation. I was like, yes, you are. You wouldn't be here if you weren't supposed to be here.
Who would have thought we would be where we're at right now before the rapture happened 20 years ago? Yeah. I mean, honestly, like, we're having stuff happen now that you read the Left Behind books, and it's like, man, real life's crazy.
I've had people try to explain that to me too with the Tulpa effect. They're like, well, God exists because millions and billions of people believe that he exists, and just like with Allah. And I said, yeah, that there is some truth to that, not in the way that people think, though. I do believe that there is a to pull us out of this period that we're in. And I do believe in that. That's 100%. But I also know that worship and obsessing on these demons or these gods or goddesses or whatever you want to call them does give them power, because you're giving them energy. Because there have been experiments. I know everybody's heard about it. Like I explained to this person, I was like, God is not a tulpa created by our image. And the image is in our mind. Because a billion people believe in it, whatever, you do give more energy to that. But you can do this doing it indirectly, but they're just directly flat out serving him because they figured out, hey, to get the goodies in this life, let's just go follow this guy and he'll give us what we want. But it's a sucker's deal, because you're not going to get, it's not a long-term plan, believe me.
Yeah. And the thing is, you don't know what,
as a decrepit old mummy, but at the end, you're still going to pay. The price it's going to come due, and the ruination of man's souls is the key. Because even if you believe, like one of my former friends' ex-girlfriend, which is now, I think he's his ex-girlfriend now. I don't know. I lost touch with him, but she was talking about the Kabbalah, and even if you believe like her, the debt will still come due. And I was like trying to tell him and like to explain a little bit about what I knew, but then I took a deep dive into it and then started reading it, handle the information without being seduced by it, because it's very easy it's seductive, to be seduced by these false religions and these false beliefs. But they do have, there is a power there. It's not a good power. you know, but there is a power there. But if you look at like what they believe, you're going like, okay, I can see where they're coming from with that. And maybe some of that's true, but it still doesn't mean that you should go and dabble in it or mess with it, because it's like a shortcut, you know, to try to get what you want. And you may get what you want, but it's just like a credit card. The bill is still going to be waiting for you at the end.
That's right.
Charge it all you want. And I just tell people all the time to stay away from that. And Kabbalistic magic is really, really big right now in Hollywood. I'm like, you know, and it's this mysticism that everybody's like just searching for, you know, and I believe the mindscape, you know, has created a lot of this stuff, but they're giving it power by literally worshiping and obsessing over it. I had this one guy who told me he wanted his dog man 10 to 12 times a day, and I'm like, oh, that's great, that's wonderful. Let's keep giving this thing power instead of talking about the truth about this thing and the horrificness of it. You know, these people have put it on some sort of pedestal where it's like some sort of superhero, some sort of amazing creature, and they post pictures of it and they think it's really cool, and it's like this, and some of them are delusional enough, and they've told me and Barton this, and Barton, you know this, they think that it protects them or that they can talk to it, and you know.
The interesting thing about that is, well, two things. Haven't there been sightings of things like that at Skinwalker Ranch?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
And isn't that like, I believe that there's a lot of like witchcraft that's involved with everything that's going on there. Actually found where somebody going into where they knew they were going to investigate and done rituals right before they went in. It was Ramsey, but he was a guy that Ed and Lorraine Warren dealt with that was possessed. I keep thinking it was in England, I believe, but he was like taking on.
So tune into the next episode where I return with my guest and with Barton Nunley. And thank you for listening to PRT. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Good night.